Hello, I am Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be talking about the legendary and rare tier list for, well, the end of December. I haven't had a chance to record the video, but this was published at the end of December. So, the Dungeon Challenge meta has once again been heavily shifted and influenced by the introduction or presence of Wood Nymph, because Wood Nymph essentially allows you to have a flying medium creature who can AoE stun and basically cause your team to lose their mana funneling, comboing abilities, and all forms of happiness altogether. Furthermore, a lot of other players are now starting to utilize Toads, the small ground creature, as well on their floor one, so you have two distinct AoE stunners to basically completely disrupt and basically tear apart attacking teams. So as a result, the teams we use in offense have to change because of all these new, the stun meta kind of coming back. At least on the bright side, the stun meta is not as dominating as before because you cannot be chain stunned. You'll at least be able to take at least one action at some point. Granted, you may be debuffed and have no mana, but at least you can take an action and thus kind of regain mana or even cast a special if you had mana charged up from before. So this stun meta is not necessarily the most fun. It kind of feels like you're rolling a dice, flipping a coin, because if they start with stuns and specials, you're going to lose more likely than if they just start with specials and no stuns. However, we can still build teams to counteract various challenging dungeons, and this list and video should hopefully provide some guidance. So, I clearly didn't even click on the thing here. So basically, like I said, the current meta has shifted to a stun-oriented nuke-heavy floor one. Basically, the idea is you stun people, you debuff them, and then you nuke them down with powerful single-target hits. And this will basically allow you to remove key threats as well as stopping attackers from comboing certain AoE special abilities. So now it becomes almost impossible to do, say, 4 times or 8 times special combo to wipe out an entire row or floor. And because of that, certain cards have been demoted accordingly because their consistency has been heavily hampered by the stun meta. So we now need to figure out special abilities that can function without any combos if they're still viable enough. Can they do enough damage? Can they provide enough value or utility? As well as cards that have innate passive abilities that are actually beneficial and helpful to allow you to survive. Now, all bosses do have natural counters, and basically with the color counter meta, or the color counter mechanic that we have right now, any green boss is going to almost always lose to any red attacker just because they're doing so little damage and taking so much more in return, and also being unable to land debuffs. So because of that, we have to keep in mind that everything has a counter. And I do get feedback from my tier list from players saying that, well, I can beat XYZ boss super easily with my team. Well, if you're arriving in a dungeon with a full team of 5 at the very end, you're almost always going to win no matter what because you have ideally enough mana, enough specials. You can basically kill anything, even if your color counter is not the best. But then they say, oh, I beat it with like 2 or 3 creatures. But again, if you have their color counter, you can usually solo them anyways. Like I said, a blue boss is going to get soloed by almost any yellow creature, so it's not really a fair comparison. So when you do see the rankings for these bosses, it's kind of taking into account that yes, there are counters, but how well can they function overall against, say, crippled teams? Because again, if a full team comes in, you're almost always gonna win if you have that full team. You're not gonna really be stopped by one lone boss, generally speaking. So, in addition to all that, I'm assuming that all creatures on the tier list have their optimal enchants, whatever they may be. And if you do wish to read more about my enchanting guide, you can click that link there. It will give you some guidance and advice as to what enchants are the best. Obviously, they can vary from creature to creature, but it gives you a good framework and template to work from. And last but not least, all creatures on this list have maximum kingdom shrines. I don't even have max kingdom shrines, but I can kind of see the projected values of them, and I'm just going to assume everyone has the same amount of kingdom shrines to keep everything balanced. And then last but not least, we have everything assumed to being 4-dot, as well as having all their optimal enchants and kingdom shrines, etc., etc. However, because 4-dots are so rare and scarce, it's safe to presume that you can move up a creature a tier or 2 if they have 4-dot and you have 3-dots otherwise. So just keep that in mind because 4-dots can influence the speed they defend in as well as the mana generation potential. So new criteria for offense. So basically we still need to use a mana funnel, and a mana funnel is essentially the idea that you are using one creature to receive all the mana from all your other cards. And with that in mind, you're able to basically charge up a special ability and have it ready for your second full cycle, your second turn, so to speak. And with this example down below, I have enough red dots as well as a Scholar Tome on my Phoenix, which will allow me to have enough mana to charge up Phoenix's special and basically nuke down one target at a time. Now this team proved to be a little slow because the Phoenix dot could be cleansed, it may not even hit, and it takes a turn for it to actually take an effect. So I've modified my team a bit, and now I have this team here. I think I gained an extra dot somewhere on my Oathkeep. My Astral got an extra dot, so that's pretty nice eventually. But regardless, the idea is I funnel all of my mana into my Oathkeeper, and he can cast a special. If he gets 8 times off, he clears a row. If he doesn't, well, I just have to grind through it. But the idea is I could actually just mash Oathkeeper immediately, get some healing, get some protection buff to help resist the stuns and debuffs that are coming in. And this team works quite effectively for myself. Now, the key with making a mana funnel is that you want to utilize cards that have the same colors. So if your funnel is white, you want to have another white creature alongside of it, so you have special diversity. You can charge up Oathkeeper, or you could charge up Astral Watcher. So for example, if I want to combo my Oathkeeper, who's the leftmost card, I would use Astral Watcher first. He gets all the white dots and thus gains mana to hit his own special. Use the yellow and green giant, and then Oathkeeper combos and can sweep the floor. So that's the main idea of a mana funnel. You want to have ideally 2 cards with the same color so you can have special diversity or different special abilities charging up faster. Now, again, you can watch this video here. It will show everything in real time and just kind of show how this funnel works as well as teams that can work. Now, strong AoE or area of effect abilities are valuable because if you can clear a row or the whole floor in one go, obviously that is ideal. You pass floor 1, you kind of win the dungeon. However, usually you need to have some sort of combo multiplier for this to take effect. You usually need 4 8 times damage to sweep the row or floor. And because you need to combo these cards, you're more vulnerable to stuns. If any of the comboing cards get stunned, you're unable to produce the damage and sufficient damage to sweep the floor. So strong AoE can work, but it's a lot riskier compared to before because you're now going to potentially get stunned and then nothing happens and you're going to be very sad. Next is pure damage is less powerful unless it's blisteringly high, but the problem is no one has a high enough special to do enough damage to kill someone without a combo multiplier. I've tried fully awakened fire giants. I haven't tried lich yet. I don't have enough essences for lich, but I don't think it's going to work still. Similar power levels, similar power multiplier. It's just not going to do enough damage. And if you can't remove a creature one at a time, it's not doing enough. If you can't remove a key creature that you don't already color counter, it's not that great of a funnel target anymore. So because of that, Fire Giant was demoted as well as other cards have been readjusted, distributed accordingly. Now, the reason that this has occurred is because the health of defenders outscales the power gains from your shrines, because health shrines give a lot of health. You get several thousand health quite easily, and you don't get that much power, so you're not dealing enough damage to keep abreast of the health gains. Because if we take away all kingdom shrines, some creatures like Fire Giant will one-shot most medium creatures because they don't have that massive amount of health and defense at the same time. So with that in mind, it's hard to have pure single target cards function as well as they used to before. And obviously, creatures need to survive. If you run fragile creatures, they are going to die. And unless you have a Resurrector or it's part of your strategy because they die and do something on death, it's not going to work that well. And now it's now hard being yellow. It used to be green. Last month being green was very hard. So Green Giant was almost in jeopardy of being demoted, but he's still such a great all-around card. But now with Wood Nymph and statues dominating your floor 1s, it's very challenging to be yellow because they get stunned into oblivion, they get debuffed into oblivion, and they're probably just going to get picked off by their basic attacks at the same time. So because of that in mind, it's hard to use a yellow card effectively because they're almost a sitting duck, so to speak. And with Nymph and Statue taking up 2 slots in your flying creature lit dungeon, you only have 1 left over. So that Wyvern may or may not be used. And then if Toad is being used on the ground, your Barbarian may not be used. So the 2 main red threats you may or may not be using that much at the moment just because you have possibly better options available to yourself. So keeping all of that in mind, it makes it a little easier to be green. You still can get heavily countered by those 2 cards, but we're seeing a little less of them in PvP just because Nymph Toads are starting to replace them, which is, I guess, in a way a good thing. Things keep changing up. If only the combo rerolling was easier to change teams more quickly. And then last but not least, mono black and white teams, like teams that have lots of white or black cards tend to be stronger because yes, they have weaknesses, but they're also strong against their weakness. So you can kind of kill them off instead of getting destroyed into oblivion. You have a chance. So that's why my team here runs 2 white cards because it's a little stronger. I guess in an ideal world, if I could find another good white creature, I would replace Storm Giant and put another white creature in, have more things to distract skeletons with, as well as having extra funnel options. That would be my main thing if I could change. My green giant's starting to perform quite well, so I want to get a new 4-dot white creature, or a white creature with 3 white dots. Regardless, that's kind of what I would like to do. Now, here are the changes that have occurred basically in the last month. So we've had Cerberus and Valkyrie get promoted to S from A, but at the same time, Sphinx, Fire Giant, Minotaur Squire, VIP8 or Fallen Angel, Colossus, and Raiju have all been demoted from S to A. I'll explain all of them down below as well. Stegosaurus has been going from C to B, and Monkey King goes from D to C. So and then Hydra goes from C to D, but we don't care about Hydra. So Cerberus. So Cerberus is easily the strongest dark creature in the game, and actually, if I think about it, I would probably want to replace my Storm Giant with Cerberus if I could actually find and get one, because Cerberus is so amazingly powerful. His durability is average, so he's not exceptionally tanky, he's not exceptionally fragile, but he has the strongest counter-attack passive in the game. He's able to basically chomp down on one enemy target as his counterattack ability. That will possibly one-shot any white defender and heavily damage, as well as apply a serious dot to non-white defenders. So just by being hit by, like, say, Nymph's stun, because it's an AoE, or Statue's debuff, which is also AoE, gives you a 40% chance for Cerberus to chomp down and heavily cripple a defender. That's amazing. Like, it's just such a powerful counterattack ability. And it makes the Black Giant, or the Abomination, seem completely worthless, because his counterattack is like 1,000 or 2,000 damage. He is like 7,000, 8,000 with dot. It's very high. So Cerberus is amazing in that regards. Furthermore, his damage output is one of the highest in the game. He ignores defense. If he gets, I think, 4 heads hitting, or 3 heads plus 1 bonus hit, I think he does the most damage possibly of any card, because the power multiplier becomes the highest, as well as having the dots, as well as ignoring defense at the same time. So he doesn't need a combo multiplier to basically kill most enemy bosses, which is pretty amazing overall. So he makes a great mana funnel donator. He can have, say, 4 of the same color dots and donate them happily, and he's fine. Valkyrie goes from A to S, and I was kind of on the fence about Valkyrie being promoted or not, because, like, yes, the buffs are nice, but the cleave damage is too low. You can't cleave and kill a row, so you might remove one target if you're lucky, if you combo it up, but then removing one target with combos is kind of slow. The buffs can help, but now in this case here, no one's able to really combo, so now Valkyrie's liability is not so bad anymore. You can still do strong damage against black creatures, maybe pick off one, but the idea is you get all the buffs. You get the 4 buffs that are going to greatly enhance your survivability. You'll have luck to resist debuffs and stuns, you'll have power to deal more damage, you will have defense to basically take less damage from incoming attacks. So all of that combined is allowing Valkyrie to function very well, and also because white creatures are quite dominating, it's easy to have multiple white creatures on your team and an easy time funneling mana into any of them of your choice. Minotaur Warchief has been demoted, and it's because, yes, he has a great cleave attack damage with one of the lowest mana costs in the game, but he has lackluster awakenings after 105, like level 105, and it's very unlikely you're going to be able to combo enough anyways to actually kill a floor. So because of all that, it's hard for him to function as well as before. Still can work, but if things get stunned, like toads can go after him, but at least he resists Nymph, it's going to be a little challenging to use as effectively. Fallen Angels, same strategy, same idea, same problem. They have great floor sweeping capabilities if no one is stunned. If you get 8 times combo, you'll sweep the whole floor because you have more than enough damage. But then again, how likely are you to combo? And if you don't actually give a death blow, you don't get the AoE damage. So if you can't combo, you can't death blow, you can't AoE damage, he loses his valuability. But again, if no one's stunned, it can work very well. Colossus is S to A, same idea. You can't combo, you can't wipe the floor. Raiju, S to A. I was hoping Raiju could work as a very interesting suicide card on your team. You just give him 1 awakening, leave him level 1, don't totem him, and then he can basically go into the dungeon, just get killed by something immediately, and donate 100 mana to your entire team, so you can use specials right away. Unfortunately, that did not work out, because with Kingdom Shrines and the Legendary Health Shrine, he has way too much health, and he doesn't actually die to basic attacks like my hope was. So because of that, you can't really use a Suicide Raiju effectively because it's just not going to work. He doesn't die fast enough, he doesn't give mana, and then he's not doing anything for the team if he doesn't die. So that is problematic. So we're kind of having to use him as a fully awoken card, which is still reasonably strong, but nowhere near as powerful as before, and I might demote him further depending on how the weeks go. I don't have a Raiju. I do have a level 1 Raiju, but not enough awakenings. I don't know if I could even use him effectively. Sphinx, S to A, it's yellow. Oh yeah, yellow is bad as well. Raiju's also yellow. But it's yellow, can't combo, can't mass sweep, even though Sphinx has high damage. Fire Giant, like I explained before, it's not enough single target damage to remove a threat that is not a green nymph or a statue. So that is problematic. You can funnel mana into him, and I used him. I tried really hard, and I kept failing. And I was like, nope, gotta go back to my old team. So it's still a powerful legendary creature. It has very high damage, but it's not effective at picking off level floor 1 spawns as effectively now. Stegosaur just kind of pushing it up. Blue is actually gaining power overall because blue is not really countered by most defenders. Most people are not running yellow defenders for the most part. Stegosaur is quite tanky and durable because of the defense buff, so you're basically able to use him as a nice mana funnel donator. He can just sit on your team, give mana, doesn't really die. And he also counters Phoenix bosses, which is quite nice because he can basically solo them himself. Monkey King D2C, not as tanky and durable as Stegosaur, not as reliable as him, but the damage could be high, it can be random, but not as horrible as he used to be. Hydra goes from C to D. He feels like a terrible Cerberus, similar style active special, which is random target in nature, but lower damage and no massive dot. They both can self-heal, but Hydra heals a little faster, but again, not that important. He does way less damage, and he doesn't have the counterattack ability. So Hydra feels like a terrible Cerberus. He's a worse color, worse special, no counterattack ability. Like, it's just a problematic creature at this point in time. So now we go into defense now. So dungeon defense for at least legendary creatures revolves around having your strong floor 1 pick off enough threats for your boss to finish them off. If an attacker enters your dungeon with a full team, your boss is probably going to lose almost every single time. It's only by like massive luck, strokes of luck, where you resist a stun and somehow wipe out everyone in one go. It's not really going to happen. It's just not going to work unless people can start filling out 5 dungeons for stun and silence immunity. These bosses are just going to get wiped out by a single stun and just damage, damage, damage. So, with all that in mind, color counters are still important. They still factor in. So if you know your floor 1 is heavy and say green, you're going to counter yellow, which means blue bosses are a little stronger. So you just kind of think for your own dungeon, what kind of synergy can you employ? But for the most part, you should always use 4 dots because they attack so much faster. Now, stun was/is king. Like, stun works great on floor 1 because you have 6 things attacking all at once, and each time someone's stunned, everyone's taking an action. Whereas a boss does not function as quickly. Yes, they can be stunned, and yes, they can do things again, but they may not actually be able to cast another special ability if not enough people were stunned. Furthermore, you cannot re-stun someone, so something like Sandworm is not going to work. He used to be terrifying, but now it's just not doing enough damage, not enough stunning. It's not going to work out, but it's just good to know that stuns can be okay, but not as powerful. So as I said, color counters are more meaningful. White and black have innate advantage overall because they have a weakness, but they can counter their weakness at the same time. So they'll take damage from them, but they'll also one-shot them back. So it's kind of give and take at that point. So in my defense list, nothing has really changed except for Monkey King moving up from D to B, because at the top everyone's functioning the way they should be for the most part. Nothing new or strange or surprising has really happened. But Monkey King, I did fully awaken mine just because I thought he has potential. Like, he has interesting awakenings, but unfortunately the chaining effect does not jump over dead people. And because of the fact that it's not chaining and jumping over dead people, you're losing out on most of his damage. But the 40% crit rate can result in very surprising damage. And I did use him for the entire duration of the dungeon challenge. And I had a pretty good defense win rate, as well as actually killing some people with Monkey King. So I felt good inside. But he's a bit of a meme because he does have wording that is like a copy-paste from Archmage. So it's like, he didn't even get his own wording, which kind of feels weird in one of his awakenings because it's chained lightning. But he's a Nimbus Strike. There's no lightning involved. So I'm not sure where that comes from, but regardless, he's not as bad as he used to be. I thought he used to be horrible, but he can actually produce surprising damage. He could one-shot any creature if he crits, which is pretty high, as well as chaining can crit and do surprisingly high damage. Of course, it all depends on having everyone clumped together so it just ricochets and destroys everything. But if things have dead creatures in between, it can't jump. If you could chain over dead people and still do the damage, he could actually become a very formidable boss. So that's kind of where I hope he goes. Because he's a little fragile, he's inconsistent, but it could be exciting at the same time. So again, I have another video about building a strong defense, showing you color synergy, showing you tips and tricks. So now I go to my rare creature tier list. Again, I'm deciding to smush all my tier lists in one go because some people like to have just one easy access point. So basically, you can read about my rare creature tier list here if you want to read a bit more detail, but for the most part, I've kind of copy-pasted my previous one because it happened so recently. But the idea is you want to kind of create some sort of dungeon synergy, and you want to have like a dungeon that obviously presents enough threat but has enough support for itself that it can sustain itself even if not everyone's up at once. So elaborate dungeon synergy essentially means doing something that's above and beyond the norm. Like a power buff is not really elaborate synergy, but producing a luck buff to buff your kitsunes is more elaborate because that's not something you would normally do. So you can think of it this way, like you have multiple poison cards to proc the on poison damage more often. You can run a luck debuffer to make Mummy do bonus damage against those targets. Like those sort of ideas of a more elaborate dungeon synergy. But for the most part, we want to try and focus on how well a card can perform by itself without any of this elaborate synergy. And with this in mind, we're going to obviously assume everyone's the same combo dot, same shrines, same enchants, but these are the points you want to consider for your rare creatures. Does the color counter popular meta legendaries? Like if you know everyone's using Astral Watcher, use dark creatures. Does the special deal large amounts of damage? Like is there a bonus to critical strike hits, higher multiplier damage rates, multi hits, etc., etc.? Like are they going to get bonus surprise damage in some way, shape, or form? Because that means they're more likely to one-shot someone. Does the special provide a reliable stun or silence? Again, if they can't use their special abilities, can't take action, you're going to have a good time because they're incapacitated. And does the special provide multiple relevant buffs or debuffs? So for example, the good buffs are power or mend. Those are the two best buffs for the most part, universally speaking. And the best debuffs are power, so they can't do enough damage, defense, so they take more damage, and fatigue, so they can't heal through your onslaught. So yes, having a healer on your dungeon defense is important, but if they don't provide something more than just healing, you have better options available. So here is my rare creature tier list, and for flying, we have only the Chaos Nymph debuting at B. Everyone else stays the exact same because this was done maybe like 2 weeks ago. Not much has changed aside from Chaos Nymph and just normalizing various creatures within. And on the ground, nothing has changed again. Like, I'm just thinking, like, I know Toad is not a medium, but Toad is somewhat pushing out some of the more meta ground creatures, so to speak. So, Chaos Nymph debuts at B. So Chaos Nymph is the second exclusive rare creature we can gain from Battle Tower. It's nice because it gives everyone at least a 3-dot, but then the 4-dot distribution is kind of problematic. I never got a 4-dot, so I feel a little sad. I farmed lots, but I couldn't get a 4-dot. So it's worse for the Wood Nymph because that's a more powerful creature. So I didn't feel as bad when I got a 3-dot Chaos Nymph, but the 3-dot Wood Nymph hurt my soul a little bit. But regardless, Chaos Nymph has a very interesting kit. Like when she dies, she provides massive buffs. So you don't want to kill her first, obviously. So it's kind of like you just leave her for last. But at the same time, her special is quite interesting. It heavily counters specific creatures, but against other compositions, it's completely worthless. So I kind of like this hit and miss style, and that's why she's B, because she is very good against very specific team setups, so it's a great counter, but against other teams, it's completely worthless, because her damage is reliant on how many buffs you steal. So if you don't steal any buffs, she's doing almost no damage, and she's just kind of sitting there. It's not really providing much. You don't want to kill her because she gives buffs, but she's not providing much damage, not much other benefits to the team overall. However, if she steals multiple buffs, her damage goes quickly up, as well as giving your team all those buffs. So with all that in mind, she can be very powerful. Like if you are running cards like Anubis, Valkyrie, all the Genies, and Oathkeeper, she's quite potent and effective because those cards rely on those buffs being present to combo with themselves and produce bonus secondary effects. But if you take those buffs away and give them to yourself, you could be quite powerful. However, what I want to point out is that if you run something like Wyvern or the Nine-Tailed Fox, you can dispel all their buffs, or many buffs. And you have to think, do I really want to use Chaos Nymph if they only have one buff? Would I rather not have Wyvern, who does massive damage, huge power buff, and just great for your team overall? So it's kind of like if you know who's attacking your dungeon, you know they're reliant on their Valkyrie or their Anubis to succeed because they produce the most buffs, throw in a Chaos Nymph. You'll steal their buffs, so then you get all their power, and it kind of helps mitigate the need of, like, say, using Wyvern or Kitsune instead, because yes, you could have dispelled them, but now you can steal them. Stealing them is a little better when there's lots of buffs. If there's one buff, like Protection from Oathkeeper, not really worth stealing. It's better to just have a Kitsune or a Wyvern dispel it. But I like the design of this card. It's one of my favorite design cards because you can't kill it right away because of the threat of buffs, but it can counter certain cards. And that's nice. It's not like all around overall dominating. It's like niche situations where you want to use them. So then dungeon selection. You generally want to use dungeon 5 for all 6 medium or rare creatures, or dungeon 4 if you don't have 3 strong flyers. But right now, this is the dungeon roster I've been using. Basically, you want to have a mix of support and offense. So in this image here, I have Wood Nymph as a support, Statue, and Toad. All of them are support characters. They don't do that much damage. They provide buffs or stuns or debuffs for the team. And then I have my Owl, my Skeleton, and Lizard Man dealing massive amounts of damage. And hopefully if they're stunned, they can keep attacking because they're 4 dots and remove all the various threats. So I would never go more than 3 supports, because if you go more than 3 supports, your damage starts to drop off too quickly, and then you have problems actually killing people. Again, with that in mind, you probably want to have at least 2 to 3 supports as well, because if everyone's all damaged, they might just walk all over your dungeon because they could just combo up and sweep your floor. You need some support to back up your DPS, essentially. It's just like any game. So this is the dungeon I've been using. It seems to work pretty well. I might modify it or tweak it based on who comes knocking through. But I decided to use my Toad because I have a 4-dot Toad. I have a couple 4-dot Toads, actually. And I decided it's worth using it to have synergy of Wood Nymph. To basically, if I can stun them into oblivion, my Skeleton, Lizard Man, and Owl can do enough damage to punch them down. If I had a 4-dot Nymph, I would probably throw in a Drill instead of Toad. And that's the big issue, because Drill is a support, but he actually has quite high damage. And the defense break means everyone's going to be one-shotting much more quickly. So if I had a 4-dot Nymph, I would probably use the Drill Man, and that would actually work quite well for myself. At least because then I'd have kind of 3.5 damage dealers with still 3 supports at the same time. So it's just something to keep in mind. But again, I have a 3-dot Nymph, not enough stunning, not enough to keep them stunned. So I decided to use Toad. Now, this is what I kind of feel like might be one of the more ideal dungeon compositions, assuming everything is 4-dot. Because Wyvern is better than Owl in my opinion, so those are the 3 best flyers you can run. Because Wyvern gives you power buff, and power buff makes all your power creatures deal more damage. So the double skeletons at the bottom rely on power, have 40% crit rate as well, so they get the massive damage boost and one-shot whites, and possibly even one-shot other colors because the damage would be so high. The Nymph and Toad can stun people into oblivion. Statue's obviously great for the debuff and buffing. So maybe this 4-dot Nymph, maybe if it was that, maybe I'll use a 4-dot Drill instead. So maybe a 4-dot Drill, maybe a 4-dot Toad. I guess it depends who comes knocking. If they're using a fire funnel, I'll probably throw in a Toad. That sort of idea. So in conclusion, there has been some changes in the legendary tier list as well as the debut of Chaos Nymph because the dungeon defense and the dungeon meta has changed since last month. So let me know what you think about the tier list as well as who you have been using to great success on terms of defense and offense. Hopefully you all have a fantastic day. I wish you all the best of luck in your own CQ adventures and happy questing.